Welcome to the Unstuck Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Miner. This weekly no-fluff mindset show arms you with the practical tools you need to get unstuck so you can get exactly what you want out of life. Remember, when you change your mind, your life will follow. Let's get into today's episode. Hey there, friends. Welcome back to Unstuck. Thank you all so much for tuning in today and every single episode that you choose to listen to. You know, I appreciate it so much. I tell you that all the time, but it really is coming straight from my heart. Today is a very, let me do it one more time, very important topic that we, especially as women, need to wrap our heads around and make sure we are really tuning in to our own self-compassion, both now and throughout all of life. Really, it should be a daily practice. So today we're getting into some self-compassion talk. In my opinion, it's long overdue here on Unstuck, but as I've told you before, I have so many topics to cover here on the show. If I think I said this at the beginning, I created a document with all of the possible topic episodes before I even started the show, because I wanted to make sure I had enough to really make a good podcast out of it. And within one afternoon, I had about 5 years worth of topics. So, you know, you can't fit it all in. And speaking of, you may have noticed that I did not have a Tuesday episode this week. And this is going to kind of play into what we talk about today, which is that I have been just not productive, not nearly as productive as I'm used to being, because I am in quarantine. I'm quarantined. I can't leave the house. I can't go to the office, which is where I normally record everything. My partner, of course, is also quarantined. Our animals, of course, by default, are also quarantined. And we live in a very small home, and I don't have the necessary alone time or quiet time to do the work that I'm used to doing. I think in combination, just the collective energy of all of us right now, we as a unit, as humans, are all putting out a different level of energy right now. And I think you all can feel that. It feels different. Life feels different. The weight of energy feels different. I hope that makes sense using that analogy of weight and energy. But I think you can feel that. I can feel it. And just myself, my own energy is off too. And that's something I'm working, of course, to nurture. But with that, it comes with less productivity. And I have not had the ability to record 2 episodes this week, and I probably won't be able to do so on a super regular schedule until some of this has resolved and we can leave our homes and go to our workplaces and get a little bit more self-alone quiet time. Then we'll make sure to get back up on that. I just want to let you all know that I am fine, but it's going to be a little harder for me to record 2 episodes per week as of right now. Fridays are Fridays. They will always be here for you. And just in case you are listening to this in the long distance future, I am recording this episode. And so what I speak about as kind of a relational tool in this episode is around the coronavirus pandemic, the need for, I think, most of the world at this point to be quarantined or at least somewhat isolated, social distancing. I think most of the world at this point has been touched by this in some way. So that's what I will be talking about right now, because that is what we are dealing with right now as a society. And it really has shown itself to be, at least in my case, and I think that you are going to find this for yourself too, a great use of self-compassion And if not, I want you to start taking the stuff we talk about today into account into your own life right now and find a really nice practice around it, because we all deserve a nice, healthy dose of self-compassion, not just now when we're facing a global crisis and life has been turned upside down, but always. And this may be a great starting point for you, if this isn't something you've done before, to find a way to cultivate some compassion for yourself. And if this is a practice already for you, if this is something you're already doing, then now is a really good time perhaps to boost it up, to maybe really see how this is playing out for you and what's going on in your reality right now. And I think regardless, after this discussion, we're all going to be able to see how handy self-compassion is in times like this, in times of uncertainty, in times of chaos, in times of sadness or loss. And they're going to happen in our lives. There's no doubt about that. Having these extra tools in your pocket is where we can really start defining ourselves during these times when life becomes a little different. We'll say that. So let's kick off the topic of self-compassion with my own story. As I've said, I have been really having to practice a lot of self-compassion over the past, month now. And it really stemmed from not being as productive as I thought I would be. I went into this thinking, okay, I can't go anywhere. I'm going to have all this extra time. I have already worked from home for years. I didn't always have an office to go to. This is going to be great. I'm going to create all these new things. I have all these ideas. All these amazing new resources are coming into my head. I'll be able to help all of my listeners and all my followers really get through this. And for me, being an entrepreneur, I follow a lot of other entrepreneurs or even business coaches. And they started coming out with their message being that now is the best time to grow your business. You got to serve your following. You should be growing your following. You should be creating all this new stuff. And it really comes across, at least it did to me, as if you're not doing something super productive right now and really leveraging this time to build your business even further, then you're doing a huge disservice to your business. You're not good at business. You're not a good entrepreneur. You're failing. That's how it came across to me. And I don't think I'm the only one who feels that way when they hear these things. And then they're like, wait a second, I'm in this really terrible, horrific, uncomfortable time right now. My life has been completely turned upside down. I don't have physical space to do this work, but I also don't know that I have the emotional space to do this work, the energetic space to do this work. And yet here I am supposed to, quote unquote, be doing all of these things, being really super productive right now. And for me, I can't do that. That is not how my mind, body, soul, spirit, energy body is responding to what's going on right now. As I said, my productivity is way down. My creativity is way down. My clear-headedness is way down. My alone time, my quiet time, where I can actually get something meaningful done, is way down. It's all just not happening. And the old me, like, let's say 3-4 years ago, would have basically been having a panic attack about this, seeing everyone else doing all this stuff while I'm failing, while I'm sitting here basically frozen. I would be beating myself up. I would be a definite, no question, stress case, like walking stress case. And I would be telling myself all of the stories. I'm not cut out to have a business. I'm not strong enough to have a business. I'm not smart enough to do this. I don't work hard enough. I'm not creative enough. All these things where I'm not enough. That's the old me. Hasn't been that long. But now I practice self-compassion. And this was something I learned probably about 2 years ago. So it was a little further into my mindset work than some of the other things I talk about here. But it kind of came along with it as I continued to grow and expand. So this may be something where you're feeling it too. I know I had the live virtual meetup with the Unstuck Collective members last night, and this was a topic that came up when you see people doing all the things, or you see people saying you need to make the best of your free time, or learn a new skill, or read a bunch of books, or, these lists of all these things that you should be doing, and you feel paralyzed. You feel like you just can't. First of all, I hope now I have given you a little bit of comfort knowing that you're not alone, knowing that that is okay, and I would say expected in a way. We're not expected. We don't know how to handle something that we've never been through before. And to feel like you're doing anything wrong or not handling it correctly, or you should be doing something different, or you should be making better use of your time, that's not for anyone to say. We don't know. No one knows. You're you. You're in a new situation. We're all doing this new thing together, which is kind of comforting, I feel like. But I just hope you know that there's no right way to do anything right now. Your example may be with parenting or homeschooling or work from homing or exercising without a gym or anything like that you've been thrown into doing for the first time ever and then trying to do it, quote unquote, right while feeling like you're coming up short because you're not. And you're seeing these other people, whether it's on Instagram or Facebook or your friends telling you what they're doing, and it's like they're doing it all. They come across as being able to do it all, as being this awesome homeschooler, doing all this great stuff with their kids, finding all these different ways to keep them entertained, while also working from home and keeping that all together, and also completely redecorating and reorganizing their home, right? Like they're just literally doing it all. That actually could be true. They could be doing it all. That might be their way of coping. It might be a defense mechanism. It might be a way of not dealing with their emotions, or it might be how those emotions are expressed in them. We don't know. But the bottom line is that doesn't mean that what you're doing, if you aren't holding it together, if you aren't being productive, if you're not able to homeschool the way that you would want to if you weren't also working from home or whatever your case may be, it's okay. And it might just even be in a way where you emotionally feel like you're coming up short, like you're stuck in this place of stress, anxiousness, feeling scared, feeling grief, feeling anger, these really low vibe emotions, and you just can't seem to shake it. And yet you see other people who seem like they're doing fine and they're happy and they're positive and upbeat, and it's seemingly not affecting them emotionally. Again, could be a facade, could be their coping mechanism, could be their personality. But that doesn't mean that you are doing anything wrong or different or not approved or not the right way or not how we should be doing anything. And this happens all the time in life. I think we have some really good clear-cut examples, which is why I wanted to talk about self-compassion right now. But this happens all the time in life, and especially coming from a place where I was talking to a lot of women who were dieting and had been dieting for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, that is also a really wonderful place to use self-compassion. And it was so clear to me, and I think you all know this by now, that's why I started the Unstuck podcast, was because this kind of work, this kind of thought process, this kind of emotional reaction wasn't there. It wasn't something that the women I was working with had. And I really wanted to help develop that in them. I really saw it as something that would be of service, and I wanted to help create that. So here we are, diving into it all together. What is self-compassion? First of all, to start this conversation, I want to let you know that if this is something that intrigues you and you want to learn more, your go-to gal is going to be Kristin Neff. She is really the researcher behind self-compassion. She has all kinds of articles, blog posts, tools on her website, which is self-compassion.org. So I highly recommend going there. She has wonderful books too. She even has a workbook that I think is really great. So huge shout out to her, Kristin Neff, if you are interested in that. But she says self-compassion is giving ourselves the same kindness and care we would give a good friend. I think we all have had this experience, or we've thought about this, hopefully, to some degree in the past of, would I say what I'm saying to myself to my best friend? That's something to really think about. That's something to get honest with yourself about. Think about what it feels like for you to be compassionate towards someone else. Often, I think we can agree with this, you come from a place of understanding their suffering, of wanting to help in some way, be of service to them in some way. You feel kindness towards them for their hardships or mistakes. You don't feel like you're judging them or you're blaming them, or you feel resentment or anger towards them. When you feel compassion, you have this soft kindness and understanding for what they're going through. Now transfer that towards yourself, and you've got self-compassion. So let's go through that again. You come from a place of understanding of your suffering, of wanting to help yourself and be there for yourself, of kindness for your hardships and mistakes, not judgment, not blame, not resentment. And I think going through that, you would agree with me that it's quite easy, I think for most of us, to have compassion for people in our lives. Maybe not everybody, maybe we're still working on that with some people, but for the most part, we can easily find a level of compassion for people. And especially if they are people we're close to, our best friends, our family members, we have so much compassion. But then I say the same exact sentence of what that means, but direct it towards ourselves. And it's like, ooh, I don't know. I don't know if I do that. I don't know if I feel that. I know for sure there have been times when I haven't. I think it becomes a lot harder to see that when it's focused back in to ourselves. And why is that? Why do we do that? Why is it so hard for us to be compassionate and kind and loving to ourselves? I think a lot of you know what I'm going to say next. It's because of your stories. Those stories that are playing over and over and over again in your head and have been for years, that say you're not enough, that you don't deserve, that you aren't worthy. It starts there. It starts with that negative inner critic, chatter, mean girl, all those words we use to describe that voice here. It starts there because when we are in accordance with those stories, those limiting beliefs, and we let that chatter take over, that's what we think about ourselves. And then we don't think, or we really can't find that soft, kind, caring, loving emotion towards ourselves because we have those really negative, untrue stories. Moving on to a little more about self-compassion. When you're having a difficult time or you make a mistake, you notice something you don't like about yourself. Okay, let's take note of that one. That's a big one. Instead of beating yourself up or even ignoring it, you respond with care for yourself and the difficult emotions and thoughts and actions you're having. Now, this is really where self-compassion comes into play and really becomes its own thing because you aren't ignoring, you aren't turning it off, you aren't turning a blind eye. Of course, you're not beating yourself up, but you respond. You do respond to those negative, difficult emotions and thoughts you're having, but you respond from a place of care, of understanding, of love. And that's really where it comes in. So we're replacing criticizing with care. And like I said, working with women who were very interested in changing the shape of their bodies and had been dieting as a way to do so for years, and were really, really focused on their physical bodies and the scale and their weight and their size and all of that. There wasn't the ability to respond with care, with understanding, with compassion. That wasn't there. And that may be something that you can relate to, or you may find that in other areas of your life when you do make mistakes, when you're going through a difficult time, when you're not doing what you think you should be doing, like AKA not being as productive as you think you should be in a time of crisis. Moving on, according to Kristen Neff's research, there are 3 elements to self-compassion. The first one, self-kindness versus self-judgment. This is basically just fully understanding that failures, mistakes, imperfection, and difficulties are an inevitable part of every human experience. Knowing that it is not unique for you to make mistakes, for you to fail at things. This is a common occurrence that happens to all of humanity. And then responding to those inevitable times that we all will experience with kindness versus judgment. Number 2, common humanity versus isolation. Suffering is a common human experience we all have, not something only happening to just you. Similar to what we talked about before, where we're all going to make mistakes, we're all going to fail, we all have imperfections, we're all human. So you calling yourself out to understand that it's part of being a human and it's not just you. It's not just something that happens to you. Third thing, mindfulness versus over-identification. Finding a balance in your negative emotion so we're not just suppressing them, but also not exaggerating them. Can you find the balance between those two? Between suppression, not feeling them, and exaggerating, wallowing, living in them. So you have this non-judgmental observation of your emotion. You identify them without getting caught up in them. You allow yourself to feel them, to express them to do what you need to acknowledge that those feelings are there with compassion. And you do this all without getting caught up in them or making them your identity. So big, right? There are several different tools. These are the ones that I personally have been doing to practice self-compassion over the past few years, but really now bringing them out more regularly as I'm having these experiences of my ego wanting to feel like I'm not doing enough, I'm not productive enough, I'm failing. Noticing that ego talk, noticing the emotion that comes with it, and then finding this compassion for it. This is how I've been doing it. The first one, imagine your best friend or your mom or your sister or anyone who's really close to you that you really care about calling you up right now, or maybe you're on Zoom, having a little Zoom happy hour, and explaining their issue right now. And it's the same exact issue that you are having, the same feelings that you are having. You're in the same kind of negative headspace. What would you say to her or him? How would that sound if it were from someone else? Now, this is where we journal. Get out your journal and write what you would say to your bestie who's going through the same exact thing that you are. But instead of directing it towards her or him, direct it towards yourself. So replace you with I as you're writing out that conversation. This is very powerful. It is very good. I highly recommend it. It will almost bring you to tears when you realize that you can be that nice and comforting and caring to yourself. So do this anytime. If you're feeling a little off right now, it would be a good time, but this works anytime you're feeling that negative space and you don't know what to do with it. It helps. The second thing I'm going to tell you is meditation. Self-compassion comes a lot easier, a lot more naturally from a parasympathetic state. And meditation gets us into that parasympathetic state where we can respond adequately. We can respond with that understanding. We can see the other side of things instead of seeing like we made a mistake and life is never going to be the same and we just have to blame ourselves. With a little meditation mixed in there, 10 minutes of parasympathetic state, you can shift the perception of what just happened from this place of blame to it was a mistake. We all make mistakes. I have learned something great from this mistake. I'm going to feel those emotions and set them free. The third thing, give yourself some extra juicy self-care time. Do something that feels really good for you and really caring towards yourself. Remember, we're coming from a place of comfort, of concern, of understanding, of care, of love to ourselves when we are acting in a compassionate way towards ourselves. And that's a really great way to kick off those emotions by really being like physically showing the actions of care to you, to your body, to your soul, to your energy, to you. So that is another great way to go from blame, resentment, ego talk, I'm not doing enough, I'm not enough, whatever we're saying to ourselves, shifting gears by way of juicy, juicy self-care. Find something extra special. And lastly, calling out that inner mean girl. Reframing what she says from a place of kindness and compassion. And this is really what I have been doing almost every day when I see these other people supposedly doing all the things and being super productive and growing their business and creating all these new, awesome, wonderful tools and doing all the stuff. And I'm here just barely getting in a couple hours of work some days because it's just too much. I have to be able to see that talk from an outsider's perspective. And we've done this work a lot on Unstuck, where we hear that voice of our inner critic, of our ego, of our mean girl coming through saying all of that and knowing that it's just a voice. It's just a really wrong, inadequate voice of my stories that aren't true. So it's a liar, really. So I see that and I can see it for what it is, and I can do the work to reframe and come from this place of compassion where I understand why I feel this way. I understand why I'm in this situation. I understand that I feel fear or inadequacy, and I'm there for myself. And I am not shying away from those feelings. I want to express them. And that's, again, when I get out my journal and I express them. I allow myself to, in a very caring manner, write out what I'm feeling and why. Because for me, that's really the best way for me to work through negative emotions is through journaling or writing, or maybe even talking to my partner, or maybe getting out in nature and just allowing myself to feel it and then let it wash away. This is also when I prefer to meditate. If I am feeling like I'm ready to let go of those emotions, I guess. Like I have seen them for what they are, expressed them, felt them, found compassion for those moments and those feelings and those thoughts, and now I'm ready to let them go. That's when, for me, meditation comes in handy as well. So those are my 4 tips. I think really the first step is to, again, of course, always, to be aware of your own level of self-compassion, both now when things might be a little different, a little more challenging, but also in other areas of your life or in other moments of your life, even thinking to some of these, maybe you've made a mistake, maybe you have failed, maybe you see something in yourself that you don't love, that you are really calling out something that's wrong about you. How do you respond to that? Do you beat yourself up? Do you ignore it? Or do you respond with care and concern like you would towards your best friend? Do you give yourself extra love? Do you give yourself extra time? That juicy self-care, as I'm calling it, apparently. Do you meditate? Do you cry? Do you get upset? Do you feel those emotions? And do you do so from a place of love and desire to stay connected with yourself and to understand yourself? So I really think that if we are honest, that might be something we haven't really done yet. We haven't really worked on yet in ourselves because we're perhaps spending our time working on being compassionate to everyone else in our lives and being there for everyone else in our lives, and yet we haven't yet done that for ourselves. So that's what I want you to work on this week, is really just getting honest with yourself about how this self-compassion is going in your life. And if you can think of a place where it may be lacking, if you can think of, that mistake you made, that you beat yourself up, or not liking something about yourself and beating yourself up about that, or even just being in this place like I am where you don't feel like you're doing enough or reacting correctly right now, or whatever it may be, write that letter to yourself. Write exactly what you would say to your bestie who was in the same boat, and see how that changes things for you. So that's your homework. Thanks again so much for tuning in, for making me a part of your day today. And until next time, take care.